You are listening to UPRN, United Public Radio Network, coming to you live on 105.3 right up to 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. UPRNTalkRadio.com.
Looking for stories that are fresh and new? Dark fantasy, humor, space exploration, time travel, cyberpunk, alternate history, and more. They're in the L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future anthology from 24 award-winning authors and illustrators, plus art and writing tips and bonus stories. L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future. Buy your copy at galaxypress.com, Amazon, or wherever books are sold.
All right, everybody, it's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcast. Yes, it is that time of year again. There's a show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards, UFO Undercover, in the category of entertainment. UFO Undercover brings you some of the most revealing and current research that is being done with respect to alien abductions and contact. Host Joe Montaldo has been an abduction researcher for over 35 years and is uniquely qualified to bring you live interviews with some of the most well-known researchers in ufology. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate UFO Undercover in the category of entertainment. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and get out and vote now.
All right, everybody, it's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. The Outer Realm in the category of Best Female Hosted Podcast. The Outer Realm is a very popular show hosted by Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, which boasts millions of listeners each week who are well known for and have been complimented on their very laid-back, roundtable style of interviewing. Together, this dynamic duo brings you the best of the best with guests from around the world who are well-versed within their respective fields of ufology, paranormal, esoteric, and other areas of high strangeness, and more. So go to podcastawards.com to nominate The Outer Realm in the category Best Female Hosted Podcast. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and do it now.
It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards, Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast, in 3 categories: education, storyteller drama, and art. For 4 years, the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast has provided advice and tips from international best-selling authors, world-class artists, contest judges and winners, and industry professionals based on the world-famous Writers of the Future contest created in 1983 by L. Ron Hubbard to help the aspiring writer and artist no matter their age. It is dedicated to the future of storytelling and art by showing that it is never too late to start, and those who make it are those who never give up. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast in any or all of the 3 categories: education, storyteller drama, and art. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and go out and vote now.
Hey there. It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. The News on the Flip Side, in the category of politics and news. News on the Flip Side is a much different news and political program which is not deemed as opinion news. Listen as Joe Montaldo brings to you just the facts from trusted sources which will allow you, the people, to make up your own minds on the various stories being reported on. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate News on the Flip Side in the category of politics and news. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and do it now. Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer and artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field. If you've been listening to this podcast or are new to it, I thank you very much. I would also appreciate if you took a moment to follow it on whatever platform you use to listen to your podcasts. I also have to let you know that our latest volume of L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future is now available in bookstores throughout the US, Canada, the UK, South Africa, and Australia, as well as through all major online retailers. It contains the 12 winning authors and 12 winning illustrators selected by some of your favorite names in science fiction and fantasy. You've heard me talking about it now for almost 4 years on this podcast, so you should know by now what I'm talking about. If you've not gotten it, get your copy. Today's guest is a repeat guest, Echo Chernik. I'm not even going to be putting down her bio because she's got so much experience in every form and aspect of art. But specifically, what I'm covering tonight on this interview is she's the coordinating judge for the Illustrators of the Future contest. And I wanted to ask her, because I get asked this quite a bit, especially on social media, what does she look for? What makes for winning art? What makes for somebody to actually come into consideration and move up the ranks as an honorable mention and as a finalist and ultimately a winner of the contest? So, before we get into that, welcome, Echo.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on again. I love doing this podcast, and it's really blown up since you started it.
Yeah,
so great job.
Really good. Thank you. So, yeah, this is what I want to do, and we're for the next hour going to be covering a lot of the basics of art, but also what you look for as the coordinating judge, and then also a bit what you do as an art director with the winners, so that they can maintain their own sensibility about it, but you make sure that whatever their talents are the best possible chance for them to be able to win. So let's just do an overview, first of all, of what the contest means to you and what it means to illustration and what it has to offer, because it is open to anybody, and there's
we get
blind judge
submissions from all over the world, from people of all different ages, and we, as the judges, can't tell. All we get is a number and the art. We don't know anything about the people that are submitting, where they're from or their backgrounds or anything like that. We judge them purely on their art, which makes it really awesome. So every year we end up with a wide variety of winners from completely different countries. And, we have a high school senior this year, and then we get some older people too. And so it's great. It's a very fair, awesome contest. And I wish I knew about it when I was back in college, because it really helps people get a jump start on their career. We, as the judges, all come down here to the workshop and work really hard to share all the knowledge. It's taken us about 30 years to gather, so that they have all that knowledge to start with right out the gate, and they don't have to spend all that time learning everything we did.
Yeah, and we got some great judges you work with. I'm just amazed with the talent that represents itself with our judges.
And a wide range of specialties too. Most of my illustration is in advertising illustration, but then we have Larry Elmore, who's more in fantasy, and Bob Eggleton also in fantasy. And then we have Craig Elliott, who's more of concept art, and B. Jackson, who has does more publishing, and she's kind of just taking over the illustration world right now. So Who knows what she's going to take over. Dan Dos Santos. But everybody has different specialties and different backgrounds. So when we get the winners in, I always ask them, what is it that you want to take home, so I can make sure that they pay special attention to, the specialist in that field.
Yeah, and we got Sergei Poyarkov just arrived.
Arrived
from the Ukraine. He had to go drive, I guess, to Poland to catch a flight because all the airports in Ukraine are bombed out.
Yeah, he said to drive to Warsaw in order to catch a flight here, but they got here safely, which is good. And he said the flight actually was really good, so that's good to hear.
And he's probably great being out of the country, out of that whole zone there for the first time in 3 years.
I can't imagine. So
yeah. Anyway, so you became the coordinating judge 3, 4 years ago?
4 or 5. Are we counting COVID? Or are we doing like COVID skip? It was before COVID, so
at least then.
I think my first year here was 2017, and then I became the coordinating judge in 2018.
Okay, so that's 5 years.
5 years, yes, 5 years.
Oh, wow, amazing.
Yeah, it gets the year you bake me a cake.
That's right.
Isn't it?
Yes.
So I get it 5 years?
Yeah, exactly. So what's amazing about having you as our coordinating judge is that you've also got a lot of experience in art direction.
Yes. Well, I also work with a lot of art directors. I've worked with very good art directors and a little bit more challenging art directors. So, and part of my job as the coordinating judge is once the winners are chosen, they're assigned a story that one of the writers wrote, that one of the writer winners wrote, and they're to illustrate it. And believe it works really hard to make sure they get a story that matches their style. That's so that it's comfortable for them to do the best illustration they can. And as the art director, it's my job to guide them through and help them create the best illustration that they can, because that illustration is going to be entered as the grand prize. So it's really important that I try to make sure that each one is grand prize worthy. And then it gets sent over to the judges. Then they get chosen afterwards, which is the grand prize. But
all the judges vote on that.
Yeah, the judges.
Everybody gives their opinion and selects.
Right. But it's my job to try to make sure that each one is as strong as it can be.
Yeah.
And some of the winners have worked with art directors and some have not. So I try to take all the good things I learned from working with good art directors and give them guidance without frustrating them. So
yeah. And one thing too that you commented on a bit earlier is that what you like to do is, especially since this is the art they're submitting to potentially be the grand prize winner and get the $5,000 check and that recognition, is that you take what they're doing and help them along with their idea, but don't set it up so that you misdirected me away from.
Yes, I want to make sure that they are actually, doing something in their style, to their strengths, and I want to make sure that I don't want any of the winners to be like, well, I didn't win because our direction was poor. So I do my best to make sure that our direction is, guiding and nurturing. And I always tell them, it'd be good if you did, what do you think about doing this? And I give them reasons behind it. And a lot of times they're like, wow, I never even thought of that. That's great. And then they end up kind of going more in that direction. And sometimes they go, no, I like it the way it is. And then, okay, well, we discussed it. So,
but it was great with Aaliyah Chen, how she had the birds.
Oh, the
birds.
You
worked out the S, so it created that subliminal, mood line, which was so uplifting.
Yes, the birds came out really, really well. I was excited with that.
Yeah, she's a grand prize winner that year.
Yep. And every once in a while, I get someone who they read the story and they think they have to go in a direction that I want them to. Like they're like, oh, there's a lot of characters. I should do a character, and their background might be more in, they might specialize more in skies or backgrounds. So I every once in a while I have to say, why don't we look at some of these other pieces? I think it would be stronger. And they go, oh, I thought I had to do something else. And then they feel more comfortable. I want them to like their piece a lot and to be proud of it. So
yeah, that was the last year, the year before, there was that one story where he tried to do people, but then you said, no, do the.
Yeah, last year he did really, really great skyscapes and like monsters. And he tried to do people, and it was just, it was okay, but it wasn't grand prize winning. And I'm like, so we looked at some of his other pieces that were of these awesome skylines, and I was like, let's do that instead. And he ended up with a really good piece. It was really, really good. So
it's great on that. So now, as the coordinating judge, because I've done this interview I did it before with Dave Farland, and then when he passed, I did it with Jody Lynn Nye on what's looked for, so that you got the rules, and that's fine on the rules that's on the website. But as a judge, what do you look for? Because we're a market, as a writer, people know you're writing to a market. So there's certain things that we just will not accept with stories. So with art, illustration as the market for Illustrators of the future, what is that market? If you can help define better that market, what works and will not work.
Okay. Well, the first off, how it works is that all of the entries are submitted and they all come to me first, and I go through them blindly. I don't know who did what. I see all the entries, and I pick out my 8 favorites for the finalists. And those are the ones for each quarter. This is each quarter that are sent on to the judges, and the judges pick the top 3 for that quarter. So I have to narrow them down. And sometimes it's really hard because there's some really good ones.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell people to make sure to submit every quarter, because it might've been so close, but if there was like 3 people that did really great backgrounds, I might've chosen another. And sometimes I look at them and I go, please enter next quarter, because, I want to see you in, because I don't know who's going to win, who the judges are going to pick. But so doing that, it's my responsibility to kind of curate which ones are going to move on. And I always look for, um, since it is an illustration contest, I always look for illustrations first, like scenes that tell a story. I don't look so much at style because being the illustrators of the future, I can't tell what the future is going to be. So I want to send to the judges all different styles so that we end up with just a wide variety in the book so that
Yeah.
it can define the future. So if a style, if a style is cohesive and the artist is good at it, even if it's not my favorite, I will still send it on to the judges because, it might not be my taste, but it could be the judges and give it a fair shot. So I look for, a cohesiveness of style. It's like, if you do black and white or you do paintings or watercolors or backgrounds or whatever, and you specialize and it looks like they all go together. That's definitely important. Having talent and having good skills, that sort of comes together, and
Mhm.
because you can kind of tell when somebody has like the raw skills to just get better, if it's
Yeah.
kind of present in there, if you know what to look for. So but overall, if I have to choose between like a couple pieces that I get in and I have to pick, I only have slot left for one of them, I'm going to pick the one that's the illustration. So if I get pieces in and it's like, wow, this is a great portrait and a great picture of some plants and stuff, but this guy has an illustration, it's got some it's not like 100% perfect, but it is telling a dynamic story, and it's pretty cool. I'm going to go for the illustration because ultimately it is an illustration contest, and and the goal is to have them improve and get better and just really blossom. And we've had some really great people
Yeah.
that have won and just gone on to have great careers.
Exactly. So now, because it's Illustrators of the Future, Writers of the Future, does the art have to have some element of science fiction or fantasy?
It doesn't have to per se. I don't like exclude them if they don't. It's better if they do because they'll have better luck, getting it. But I've let some people buy that have had it's like there was an editorial style and there was like a style from, I forget where it was, Iran, I think, and there was like a very kind of cool, I don't know, folksy sort of style, but it was really developed. And I'm like, all right, that could be really cool. And so I think ended up winning, but he wasn't able to come to the workshop or anything. But so not necessarily, but again, if they do have science fiction aspects to it, they're more likely to be chosen if it comes down to choosing between
Right.
a couple, just because it fits, it aligns better. So
Good. And that's one thing that I personally really like is, since you've come on board, the diversity of types of art that I see in the winners.
yeah,
There's
a wide variety. You look at them, you're like, whoa, this is like obviously like 12, a bunch of different artists. It's not just one
right.
style over and over again. So I think that's really important because we're, you know, creating the future and you have to put everything, out there to see what the
Yeah.
future's going to bring.
That one Iranian artist, I mean, his was just so different. It was very obvious Middle Eastern art.
It was cool.
Yeah. And then we had our winner from Max Kavun from
Mhm.
Turkey.
Yep.
Love her stuff.
Oh, yeah.
She's awesome. And then we had whoever won this year, she's not able to make it from Romania. Her style is different. We've got the two winners from Costa Rica, two different styles, but it's very definitely not what I normally see in classic, American
Right.
art.
Right.
I so love this.
I get a lot of anime style submissions too, but sometimes if they have original characters or OCs and they like, it looks like they're developing their own style, if they look good. But if it's just like a copy of characters that are out there, they usually just don't send them through. So if you're going to do anything in that style, make sure it's your own work and it's telling a story. It can be in an anime style, but it's got to be telling a story in order to really get through.
Good. So it's no copycat, like.
Yeah, not characters. Try not to copy characters that are out there. I mean, that's okay for practice because it's fine to copy things to practice. But for the contest, it should be original stories, even if it's in more of the anime style. Because we had some that have leaned that way because they're really good, but they're capable of doing stories that aren't dependent on existing characters, which is important.
Right. So is there anything for you that's an automatic turnoff? Things that will automatically disqualify a part, like it's graphic body parts or graphic sex or anything like that.
Well, plagiarizing, first of all.
Okay, good.
Sending other people's work in, that's a big no-no.
Yeah.
Graphic stuff, hate stuff, any of the stuff you'd expect that's already, I think, in the rules. If it ever, I don't get a lot of stuff with negative vibes and emotions to it, but anything too violent or unless it tells a story, if it's just violent or hateful, like no, yeah, it's not what we were going for.
Yeah, that's not our market.
So
okay, so now on I'm an illustrator. I'm kind of shy.
Really? I didn't even know you were an illustrator. You never told me this.
And I don't know. I'd like to send it in, but I don't want to send it in because I don't want to get my feelings hurt. I don't want to get bashed. So
you're going to hear me whispering to you, send it in anyway. It's okay. Even if you don't get in, it doesn't mean you're a bad artist. It just send it in. What's it going to hurt? And then send it in the next quarter. You're never going to get a letter back that says, wow, your stuff is really awful. I mean, because it's always a road and a progression and you're somewhere on that road. And so just keep working at it. Send in 3 pieces because sometimes if I get 1 or 2, I just push those out because I can't see your body of work. So make sure you send 3 pieces. And, even if you don't make it a finalist the first year, I try to give an honorable mention or a semifinalist. So that way you can see, hey, okay, it give you a little bit of hope to, keep going. That way, hey, you're impressive. So as long as you love it and you just keep working on it and just keep submitting every quarter. It doesn't cost any money. So, and no one's going to laugh at it or, anything.
Yeah, definitely not. It's interesting. Craig Elliott, one of our judges, he's an amazingly brilliant artist. And I think he was art director for Netflix and now he's gone back to Disney. He's just
awesome.
Yeah. He had known about the contest since it began, the Illustrators of the Future contest. He never entered because he didn't think he was good enough.
Yeah.
I did a podcast.
Artists are good about that. Artists are very good about not feeling like we're good enough or not worthy enough. So you don't know until you put your stuff out there. And even when people tell you that it's good enough, artists tend to go, well,
I mean, this is the guy that comes up with all the stuff on Mulan and all these major movies. That's his create. He didn't think he was good enough to submit to the Illustrators of the Future contest.
He is super humble, super humble. Most of the artists I know that are really good are just like super humble, like, oh, I don't know,
yeah,
I don't know if I would have gotten in if I'd entered, I don't know if I'm that good. So you can't really, you can't tell. Just enter, just show people, because unless you show people, and if they say bad things about your art, well, heck with them. That's not worth anything. So don't let it bother you. Just move on to the next person, because anybody who says mean things is just trying to make themselves feel better.
Yeah, one thing that is important if you're listening to this is that the Illustrators of the Future and Writers of the Future, for the matter too, is a community, and it's a community that wants to help the fellow writers and fellow illustrators. And if you join like the forum or connect up with anybody connected with either contests, you're going to find like-minded individuals that want to support you, and it doesn't matter that you are a beginning, an intermediate, or advanced artist. It's that you want to do this stuff, because the only way you can become an advanced artist is if you hit the stage of an intermediate, and you can't be an intermediate unless you were at one point a beginner.
And you can start that any time in your life. It's going to take about the same amount of time no matter when you start it. So you might be in high school, or you might have just been like, okay, the kids are off to college. It's time for me to I really always wanted to be an illustrator. So, we've had some winners like that too, that finally got the time in their life that they can dedicate to it. So just,
yeah, we've had winners that were in their 70s, and we had one this year that's a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So we have no idea about you as an artist. All we have is your art.
And I've never seen anybody be mean to anyone else. I had nothing but encouraging, and you can pretty much reach out to any of the judges if, everybody's involved with this contest, because they love it. It's just such a positive thing for people whose careers are starting and who really want to have a career in illustration.
Yeah, when the contest was originally started by L. Ron Hubbard in '83, it was just a writing contest, and we hired professional artists to illustrate some of the stories. About 4 years later into it, the concept of an art contest, illustration contest began. Frank Kelly Freese was the original coordinating judge for the Illustrators contest. And with Mr. Hubbard's, like, this was from his essay from the very first book, a culture is as rich and as capable of surviving as it has imaginative artists. And so it's very much part of what's trying to be accomplished here is to provide for some sanity into our future. There's so much craziness happening right now that even makes it all the more important, such a contest to make it possible for the arts to survive. There's so much more, there's been the attacking of, and whittling away and chiseling out the arts, the fine arts. You don't see it in school budgets anymore. You haven't seen it for a while. You don't have all these extra summer classes you used to have to be able to help out in the arts and ceramics and stuff like that. It just gets harder and harder. So to have something like this that anybody can enter, it's free, it's open.
And honestly, even the act of entering, you should congratulate yourself on and be like, hey, I entered. All right. Even if, you don't hear back that quarter, you just feel like, yes, I entered. So, I mean, that's it's a good goal because you can give yourself a goal. I'm going to do some new pieces for each quarter and I'm just going to enter them. And eventually one day I'm going to win. So,
yeah. I mean, it's not so much on the art side, although there are people that have to go through repeated entries before they actually win. But sometimes with the writer contests, they'll be entering for 10, 20 years before they finally win. They just keep on working up. And maybe it's a good story, but it's not quite the right story for our market. So they need to learn that too.
Yeah.
And so, on the illustrate, it might be something, like you said, maybe it's nice art, but it's not illustration. So they get bumped out because somebody's actually illustrating.
I need to look and I need to be like, their art's awesome. I had one this last quarter that came through and it was awesome. It looked great, but honestly, I couldn't see it, because being a strong illustration, it was like this really great mood feeling of pieces, but they were all very moody and they wouldn't make a strong illustration. And so ultimately I didn't end up choosing them. However, they're still pretty impressive. So I think I gave them a semi-finalist or an honorable mention, because they were awesome, but they wouldn't have, I looking at them as an art director, I was like, yeah, this is not going to make the greatest illustration probably, but they're really great pieces. So.
Yeah. So on the subject of illustration, because I mean, myself not being an artist or an illustrator.
You just told me you were an illustrator.
I was pretending.
All right, go ahead.
My mom saved my first illustration that I did when I was a little kid. I won't describe what it is right now, but it was
refrigerator quality material.
Not even. It was not good. Yeah. But anyway, it's proof that I'm glad that I went in the direction that I did. But so if someone wants to get started off and they're considering having a career as an artist. They love the idea, they love creativity, they have some talent, some aptitude in the area of art, whether it be with a pencil or charcoal or watercolor or learning Photoshop, whatever it is. What would you recommend to help encourage them and to, I guess, coach them along? It's like if you've got someone you wouldn't give somebody a guitar and expect them in the next week or so be ready to play in a rock band. You wouldn't give somebody a violin and say, okay, now let's put you in the orchestra. You need to.
All the artists that I know that are professional artists, we just love it. It's not really an option. We're just drawn to doing it all the time. And you just keep following that passion, keep drawing. Drawing is the number one important thing because it doesn't matter what media you're in. You can learn different medias, but you need to learn how to draw and that basic structure behind it. Talent is really just the ability to just sort of put these things together because you just I don't know, you have a keener eye for color or for composition than other people, but even people that aren't super talented in it can still learn it. It's just it's a little bit harder. So I've known people in both ways, but if you love it and you're just going to keep working on it, then eventually you will succeed at it as long as you keep working on it.
Yeah.
Just keep working towards it and don't let anybody talk you out of it.
I think that's a really important thing that people don't give enough credit to, because sometimes the people that are connected to them are so busy invalidating
Yes.
the artist that they can't see the sky for all the gloom that's just clustered around them.
Don't listen to too much on the internet. I mean, because a lot of people like to put people's art down just to make themselves feel better, and they just are jerks for no reason other than just because they want to feel better. So a lot of people are like, "Oh, I posted my piece up and nobody liked it, or somebody said bad things." Just don't put any stock in what people say on the internet. Just do your art, find comfortable forums that aren't mean, and work with other artists. So yeah, you just have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Really.
On the Writers and Illustrators of the Future Forum, we have a policy. If someone comes in and is negative once, they're given a warning. If they're negative a second time, they're booted.
I didn't even know about that policy. I've just never seen anyone be negative, really.
Yeah, we've had a few people get booted.
Yeah.
But when people are welcomed to the forum, it's okay, good. Welcome to the forum. Here's the guidelines.
Yeah.
So we're just not into, if you want to put yourself in some place where you're going to set yourself up to being attacked and hated and stuff like that. There's a lot of places you can go. The Rise of the Future Forum is not one of them.
No, even when there are rules for critiquing artwork that that we learn in art school that some people don't know. And when you look at a piece of art, you're always supposed to say something positive about it first. And if you don't know what else to say because you don't know what it is, you're just like, well, that's interesting. Tell me about it, because I'm not sure what it is or if it's right side up, but tell me about it. Trying to learn more about it. Always say something positive about it. You never say, oh, well, that's kind of drab. You always start off with, wow, what I love the palette. It's very moody. What's going on here? And let them talk a little bit about it. So you always start off positive, and then hear what they have to say. And then if there's any constructive criticism, you can kind of work into that, but never anything too negative.
Yeah.
So
on getting back to myself as that aspiring artist that's very shy and timid.
Okay. All right. Back into that again.
Yes,
back into pretending.
We're back to that. So, but I do have a brother that's he likes my stuff and he thinks I should do something, but I just don't feel good about it. So what if I'm that brother? Should I help?
You should encourage them to enter the contest, because what's the worst that can happen?
They're good. No matter what, you're going to email saying, thank you for entering.
Yeah.
Please submit again. That's the worst that will happen.
That was the worst that'll happen. No one's going to laugh at, I don't laugh at anything that comes across. I don't go, oh my goodness, why did this person enter? I'm like, yeah, go again, enter again. You can see, because I actually recently found a trunk of my really, really old work from like high school. And I went through it with my daughters and I was like, oh, that's really good. Oh, what was this? Oh, I knew. It's kind of like kind of scary looking back, but everybody has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't get good until you've been just continuously doing it. And then you talk to other artists and you're like, wow, I love your technique. How do you do that? And then you learn how they do it, and then you kind of practice it, and then you get better. And, it's a journey.
Yeah. And you made that comment about, I wish it was around when you were starting. Bob Eggleton was the same way. There's several of our judges said, I wish it was around when I was starting. Because it's hard to actually get the validation and recognition sometimes, that, hey, that's good. Keep on going. Keep doing it. You've got what it takes. And so many of the winners, when they come up on stage and do their acceptance speeches, they're crying just because they never thought they had enough that they were
Yeah.
good enough. And then here they finally get recognized, and all their peers are out there cheering them on. It's an amazing experience.
It's great. And people, they don't trust what their family says a lot of times because their family's like, "You're wonderful. You're the best." I'm like, "Well, I don't trust it. You have to say that because you're my mom or whatever."
Yeah,
So, but the forums and stuff and working with the other artists, when they say it, it feels a lot better. So,
exactly. Now, does it help sometimes just to go out and see what's out there? Like, one thing for the writers, we tell them, if you know how good you have to be, read the book. That way, that's where you can see how good you have to be as an author to win the contest. But it would seem like also,
it's good to see other artists and study art styles. Don't let it intimidate you. Don't be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm never going to be that good," because there's a lot of art on the internet. I mean, even I get intimidated. I go on the internet. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, there's so many good people." And my husband reminds me, he's like, "All right, you remember how many people there are in the world? How many billion of people?" He's like, "You're looking at like 100 really awesome people out of the whole world." So you got the internet makes it really, really small. So don't get overwhelmed when you look at those 100 people and you think, "I'm never going to be one of those," because there's a billion people you're already better than, you know?
yeah,
So just don't, just don't get discouraged. That's the biggest
irrespective of the
pitfall.
fact that you're one of those 100 people. But anyway,
Yeah, well, but
yeah,
it's easy to get discouraged. I think that's the biggest pitfall is people they look at other people and they go, "I can't do that. I can't do that. I just can't." And then they get discouraged and they just give up. Don't give up. Just if you want it hard enough, just keep doing it. Just keep drawing and keep going to classes. Or there's so many great online classes and online schools nowadays. And I mean, Dan Dos Santos is going to be here this weekend, but he teaches the a big curriculum that's awesome, and there's like all these great art schools online you can go to and learn from.
because we've had several of our winners over the years that are self-taught. They just go to YouTube, do the videos, practice. A couple of the winners have, like, for my birthday, I want to get an iPad, with and just practicing that and just start working it and getting themselves better and
Yeah.
better and better. And
You can do it being self-taught. I mean, art school. I went to art school, and that is good too because then it's an experience. But if you go to art school and you don't put anything into it, you're not going to get anything out of it. Just like if you, or have your iPad and you don't bother drawing on it or whatever, you're not going to get anything out of it. So it's whatever you put into it that you're going to get out of it. So
but just don't be around people that are going to make nothing of you trying to become an artist, if that's what your goal is.
yeah, don't waste your time with them. So go be around people that are encouraging. And most of the artists I know are encouraging. Go to Artist Alley at a local convention and talk to the artists and ask them, "Hey, can I show you my stuff?" And a lot of times they'll be happy to look at it. You'd be surprised how nice most of the artists are.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really important, is just associate with other like-minded individuals, and you don't need the soul suckers. They're not there to help you. They're there to, they themselves maybe failed artists, or they just can't deal with aesthetics or art, and they're going to make sure that nobody else does either. So you just don't need them in your environment. And if you're unfortunate to be hooked to somebody by the hip because you're married or relative or something like that, then I'm sorry.
and work on the style or whatever excites you, because don't try to like find what's in style or what's in fashion. I mean, do what excites you and create your own style and then submit that. Don't try to like be like, "Well, this art illustrator is really popular, I'll copy that style." Do your own style and that'll come around. I mean, I did Art Nouveau way before Art Nouveau came back into style. I was just like, I'm just going to keep doing this until it comes back into style. And eventually it did.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just do your own style.
Now that brings up one point too, because one of the we have the art book that we use, that we give to all the different students, all the winners, which has all these essays from
that's a great book.
Yeah, and there's one essay which comes up repeatedly when I interview people years later, even writers, that they love the essay on Art More About, which talks about art as a quality of communication.
Oh yeah.
And no matter what your style is of art, it's the quality of communication what's the communication you're trying to get across? And maybe it's the technique that you're using, but any style of art can communicate if it's done well enough.
Absolutely. Yeah, it can be simple, it can be complicated, it can be realistic, it can be, more like stick figures, or even
That's
like
me.
Keith Haring. Yeah, it's you. You the stick figures you did.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're rocking the stick figures.
Yes.
But that's but as long as it gets across what you're trying to communicate, that's what's important. We were
Yeah.
talking about that in the workshop today, about communicating with art. And art's like all around you. A lot of times people don't realize that when they go to the bank to get money out, the little animation that's on the screen is done by an artist, that they user interface stuff. And when they go pick out a tea, they pick out a pretty tea box. They don't even occur to them that an illustrator illustrated the tea box.
The name of Chernik.
Yeah, well, I did the green teas, yeah. But it doesn't even occur to them. I've had people come up to me and be like, "Oh, you did the green tea illustrations. I didn't realize somebody actually made those." And then you just see that kind of go through their head, and they're like, "That does not make any sense at all," because of course somebody made it. So, yeah. So there's so many different fields you can get into in art. You don't have to be a freelance illustrator. You can be a staff artist or a graphic designer, and you might switch and change around. It's kind of a fluid path.
Yeah. Now, one thing that's been happening of late, and is in the news considerably, and we talked about briefly over dinner, is the subject of artificial intelligence, AI art. So,
which sounds like it would fit well with the future, with illustrators of the future, but
it doesn't.
It doesn't. No, not yet. Anyway, it doesn't. It's a difficult subject because the problem is it's trained to literally like disassemble other people's art and then reassemble it mathematically into something from the prompts. So it actually needs artists to make art that it can steal before it can make art. And yes, that is different than artists being influenced by other artists, because our brains, we process things different than a computer does. Like we see other artists and we go to a museum and look at paintings and we process that, and that we put that influence into our work, but it's not the same way an AI does it. An AI literally has like a algorithm how it pulls it apart and then like weaves it back together. And sometimes you can see the artist's name like kind of swirled in there because it's been like rewoven. And so I don't think it's right there yet.
No, but the thing on it too is Illustrators of the Future. We changed the rules. We added rules this year in the new volume that we don't accept AI art. And we discussed this also before putting in that rule, that if someone does do it and there's a question about it, that we would ask to see the layer files. Because if you're doing Chat GPT or whatever type of what's the other one that's really common, that the AI?
I don't even know.
There's another one that's
Midjourney.
Midjourney, yes.
Midjourney, yeah.
That you get one final thing. There's no layered files to show how it's being built, and there's other problems with it. But the main thing is that we can't copyright a book.
No, you can't copyright it currently
because it's not. It's already been challenged a couple times. I know last year, or maybe it was way earlier. This year, there was a book that was copyrighted, and then the copyright was rescinded once the Copyright Office looked at it and said, no, it's because it's not. It's just what you said it was. It's taking other people's art, disassembling it, reassembling it, so it's not original creation.
And it devalues artists. It really does, because it's a lot of work to come up with things and to be inspired and to learn all this, and then to have someone push a few buttons. And that was the problem when digital art first came out, because I do a lot of work digital. I also do oil painting and also do drawings, but people seem to think it was like, oh, you just push a button and it makes art. And I'm like, no, it's not any easier than painting. I still have to do all of the work, and it takes just as long. But now with AI, you can push a button, but it's not really, it's kind of an illusion.
Yeah.
It's not, it's an illusion, really. That's the best way.
I've heard people that use that, and I've talked to them, and they really try to extol the virtues of AI, and I just don't see it. To me, it's like muzak versus music. What you hear in the elevator is just the background noise that you'll hear. That's to me, it's more like that.
It's a neat trick, but it's not.
I don't think it is. And the Illustrators of the Future is an illustrator is a person, and we don't really care anything about the person other than the fact that they can create. So We've got people from all ethnicities, all countries. We have no requirements about age or sex or religion or nationality, anything. It's just, can they do good pictures?
And they grow and change in ways that AI can't, because everything a person sees, the new art and the new artists they talk to and everything that influences them makes them into grows them along their path, and it's different. So it is a sticky, highly debated subject.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's kind of a little scary, but
Well, there's a lot of wannabes that see a quick route to being an artist. Because I've talked to people that, they can't illustrate, they can't draw pictures, but they can give it prompts, and all of a sudden, look at this cover I got. Okay, that don't impress me much. It just doesn't. Same thing for like, and it's not so much an issue yet for writers, but it's getting there.
it's gonna be, yeah, definitely, it's gonna be. So,
But there's not the person. Maybe at some point down the road there'll be the personality as well. Maybe Hal will finally materialize. From 2001: Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
And then kick all the humans out. But with the storytelling, it's very there's no personality to it. And because when I was speaking with Bruce Bernice earlier on an interview, he comes with his ideas. He travels a lot, so he gets different ideas and concepts goes in the Middle East, and he goes to Africa, and he goes to China, and he sees what things are there and gets the ideas, and then he puts it together in his own mind how he wants to communicate that in the art that he creates. That's an artist.
And I work with models, and I like people models, not 3D models, and end up coming up with things and putting them together. And people look at my work sometimes, they're like, "Oh, those photographs." I'm like, "No, they're paintings." But I get to work with the model, and together we kind of create something really cool and neat. So
you do really cool stuff. When the movies came, you had people read books, and movies came out. Oh, that's the end of books. But it wasn't. And then you had theater, and then you had movies, then you had television, and then television got more and more, and each one was marking the end of demise of the previous incarnation.
Them talkies, they're gonna come in and ruin everything.
Yeah. But I was in New York recently, and Broadway and off Broadway, it was just packed. Theater, live theater it's huge.
Record players are back in, people collect records again, would ever think would go back to that?
Yeah. So, the quality of sound is so much richer, with, playing a record rather than the digital sound. And so you got people, they get their tastes, but the idea that the AI art is going to be the demise of with some people, at least, let me correct that. Not people, media, because they don't necessarily always qualify as people, because they have their own special thing, which is take something and make it as bad and as scary as possible so they can sell more copies. But the whole thing with what we're trying to do with this contest is to validate and to recognize future talent. These are the illustrators of the future. These are the people that you're going to be seeing them designing the sets and coming up with the creativity.
And AI art looks really fancy. Don't let it intimidate you, because you look at it and you're like, "Oh, wow, I can never do as good as this AI stuff," But that's just, I don't think it's gonna just be a flash in the pan, or I think hopefully, and because people really they're entranced by artists. They always have been. I mean, how can you create that? That's like amazing. And so artists have always kind of gone beyond those cultural boundaries and been invited to the parties. And, they're just, artists are always interesting to people. So hopefully that will still remain.
I definitely think it will, just based upon the past, just seeing what's happened with other trends and how it never did result in the demise of the original art form.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes things will mold, but you still find sculpture.
Mhm.
You still find, oil painting. You still find, all the different, charcoal, all types of stuff in terms of art. Even the various printing procedures that were done over the ages, people will still do that.
Oh, they'll still do that. And even people that aren't artistic, though, like to be involved through like Patreon and other things. They're like, when they get to go on and be involved with an artist, they're like, hey, I contributed to making cool stuff with an artist. And that's awesome. We rely on that. We love that,
Yeah.
because I don't know, you have to be encouraged. You need that encouraging crowd. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't
So
think it's gonna have a demise. I hope not. Anyway, that would be terrible.
yeah, I can't really see that it would be, because as long as you got creativity and creative people and people that want to be able to create, you're going to have creation.
I think there'll be more a turn towards original art. People will start to appreciate, like paintings more rather than digitally created art.
Yeah.
So I've been turning to doing more. I've always liked black and whites. I've been turning more towards like doing pen and ink and originals and stuff again, because I think people will be like, oh, well, they get tired of the shininess and then they'll go more towards the actually hand created stuff. So
Yeah.
that's where I think it'll go.
Yeah. It's funny. There was a movie that I saw many years ago, Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh, I love that movie.
I love that one too.
Oh my
Ricevia, If I Were a Rich
gosh.
Man.
If I were a rich man.
But
Don't make me start
his-
singing because I
his-
don't sing well.
his son-in-law was talking about, he made all the clothes in the
Yeah.
town, and he was always making them by hand. And it was so funny when he said that he finally got a sewing machine. We finally got a sewing machine in town. No longer will we have to have hand sewn clothing, and you look at it and go like, yeah, exactly. We've gone full circle, and now the most valued clothing, the most expensive
clothing is hand sewed.
is hand sewn. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think all these different things where something's going to like, okay, that's the end of this. It isn't. I think that those that want to be able to scare and like dissuade artists, don't get into it. The AI is going to take over. Your job's not needed anymore. And
Don't listen to
those
them.
are naysayers. And that if it wasn't that, they'd find something else to
Yeah.
try to dissuade you.
Yeah. And artists, when you have the skills, you can work in any medium. Like I said, I work a lot digitally, but I'm not limited to digital because, learn how to draw, learn how to paint, and then you can work digitally, you can work traditionally, you can make really great art with a stick in the mud. You can, once you know how to create, you can create with pretty much anything. So
Yeah. Yeah. So now getting back, we're down to our last 10 minutes here.
already?
So for the Illustrators of the Future contest, let's just recap it. So as a coordinating judge, just one more time here, just what you look for and cautionary tales like that you have, and then just tips. So there you go.
I look for send in 3 pieces, first of all, because
Right.
sometimes if you only have 2 or 1 and it's a toss up, I always look for 3 because it shows more consistency. So a consistency of style is good. Definitely telling a story, telling some sort of story of something going on, because it is an illustration contest. Science fiction or fantasy is ideal, but if you're telling me a story and even if it looks like a folk tale or something, that doesn't mean an automatic no. I can do it in your style, a style that excites you, because believe it or not, that passion that you put into it because you're excited in working that style will come through, and you can see that. You can see it much clearer when you can see when somebody's excited about working on something rather than when somebody's working on something that they think it's the style that I want to see or that someone wants to see, and they're like, oh, I think it should be like this, but I wasn't really excited by it. You can tell that they weren't. So just do what excites you, and then and just keep entering. Don't let anyone discourage you. That's the biggest thing. Just keep doing it. So if you do it long enough, keep throw in things at the waste paper basket. Like if you'll get one of them in, that was probably a bad analogy, but the darts at the dartboard, you're going to hit eventually. So no, just keep doing it. You get better. The more you practice, even if you just like, your goal is to do 3 pieces each quarter just to get better, you're going to get better. I mean, that's the worst that's going to happen.
Yeah. So now on this, one thing we've not talked about is like your personal history, how you started. So if you can just run us through, your own story of how you became an artist, what you went through, some of your trials and tribulations.
Wait, I thought you said we only had 10 minutes left.
Okay, so give me the
abridged version. I'll
yes.
try.
Yes.
So I've always known I wanted to be an artist. I went to Pratt for illustration in Brooklyn, and then I started off in. I knew in Pratt that I wanted. This was back in 95, 94. And I knew I wanted to be an illustrator right out of the gate. And so senior year, I started studying all the different forms of black and white because all of the role-playing books were in black and white. And I thought that would be a good field to at least get into. So a lot of my early work is in role-playing industry. And then I got hired by Trek Bicycles for my first Art Nouveau poster. And then from there, it just took off and I got more and more advertising work. And I didn't.
That's a beautiful that poster was so cool.
Back then we didn't have the same resources there are now with the internet and everything. It was, a lot more word of mouth and advertising through mailings and things. So it's different nowadays, but not better, not worse, just different.
Yeah.
So from there I started doing more and more advertising work, and then I got my stuff on the cover of Create magazine, and I was like perpetually behind for about 5 years. And then when the kids were little, we decided I wanted to travel with them. So we did comic book shows during the summer so we could go and travel and see other artists. And that led to a whole bunch of other new work. And now I have a gallery in Fairhaven, Washington, and a Patreon where I do my own pieces that I want to do. And I still do commercial work because I don't think I'll ever not do commercial work. I just like the puzzle, the challenge behind each new assignment.
You've done professional work for so many companies.
Yeah, like Miller, Camel, Coors, NASCAR, Trek, Celestial Seasonings, Jose Cuervo, De Kuiper, the Post Office, the military, Random House, Penguin, pretty much everybody. It's easier to list the stuff I haven't done for. I've done Disney, Mattel, Playgirl. I mean, kind of the gamut. So, which has been really fun. You learn a lot. So I personally believe to be a successful freelance illustrator, you have to kind of have several things going on because the industry changes. I mean, there's more of a demand sometimes, and it's a lot of the stuff we talk about during the workshop when we come down.
Yeah.
How to stay busy and successful and everything. And yeah, you just got to kind of keep doing new things. So right now I'm doing the Patreon and I'm illustrating Maya by Richard Adams, who was the author of Watership Down. That's pretty exciting. So it's a lot of.
You did those playing cards also for Pat Rothfuss.
Yeah, I did those a couple of years ago for Pat Rothfuss. Those came out really well. That was a lot of fun. Doing collaborations with other authors and everything. So yeah, it's always new things to do.
Yeah. So now when our last, that definitely was like the quick version that you just gave me there.
I tried.
Okay. So now on an artist or an illustrator, they want to go and so they submit to Illustrators of the Future. And at what point are they disqualified then that they can't submit to the contest? They have to be.
If you're making like a living as an illustrator, like you have a job and you've done like 100 magic cards or something like that, you're definitely making a living as an illustrator. So it's designed to be for people that are trying to break into the industry. Maybe you've had a couple small jobs, but you're definitely not making a living as an illustrator. Sort of around there. Once you start to have more and more published pieces for published names, then you're no longer considered eligible.
Right.
So if you have a couple that you managed to get and you're just starting, that's great. So but definitely you should be like, very much trying to break into the career and without
for novice.
Yeah, it's for novices. So
good. And then on just one thing to touch on too, because I think it's important. Sometimes a beginning artist is so desperate to sell something, they'll do an amazing thing okay, give me whatever, give me $25, give me,
Oh, yes.
take me out to dinner.
Yes.
Do you have any opinions on that?
It's hard for artists to learn that their work is valuable. Your work is worth, is worth your time and it's worth something. It is good. Y- yeah, don't do work for free. I do a whole section on this on the workshop, because first of all, it devalues the other artists that are working really hard. It's like, oh, I can go to this person and get it for free. I mean, it is a job, it's a career. You spend a long time working and perfecting. And so definitely know that your art has value,
How do you establish value? Is there a book or is there any type of standard or anything like that?
For setting pricing.
Yeah.
I guide them. I always recommend the Graphic Artists Guild for pricing and ethical guidelines as just a good base, because it you can flip through it and it shows you. They do surveys every year to find out what illustrators and graphic designers are being paid for each industry. And then it kind of explains all the industries and all the licensing terms and everything. And it gives you an idea of what you should be getting paid. Even if you're not, you can always, if you're still new, but you can at least say, hey, I make my prices based on this book, and you can start there. And then, and we have a whole section I talk about pricing versus, and licensing and all of that, and how to balance out your jobs, because not all the jobs are going to pay the same, and because it depends on the budgets. I mean, a job for a big company is not going to pay the same as for a indie press publisher, but they both exciting to work on. As an artist, you're like, oh, I really want to do this really small but awesome book cover, but I really want to do this really big job for Disney or a Camel or a big company or something like that. So, but their budgets are going to be vastly different. So you have to learn how to kind of balance that. So we talk about that.
Good. Yeah. So it's definitely a good thing being able to win the contest. There's lots of amazing stuff.
And even just practicing and getting things in once a quarter, you're still a better artist each time you do that. So you still win. Yeah.
And I do really recommend that you get a copy of the recent anthologies and just see what types of artists are winning. It really is across the boards. There's not a standard that they're all Disney princesses.
They're all different styles. This is what I'm going for when I send them off to the judges. I don't know what's going to get through. I send them 8 and only 3 get through. So I don't know what they're going to pick, but but I try to send them a range of just really cool, interesting styles. And they complain that it's too hard to pick. But they're all really cool. I don't know which one to pick. So, but I like the book looking diverse, because
it totally does.
They go in complete, it's got quite a range, but it looks awesome.
It totally does. Well, hopefully if you've been listening to this, you got a little more understanding and clarity of what we're looking for with the Illustrators of the future, and what you need to do to be able to submit and to know if you're on track or not on submitting. But if you're not winning, the solution isn't to stop. The solution is to keep on submitting, keep on practicing.
Talk to other artists. Don't talk to haters and random people online who you can't see. Go to bring your stuff to a comic show and talk to artists. And if one artist is for some reason a jerk because they didn't eat their lunch and they're hungry or hangry or whatever, go to another artist. Find some nice people to give you support. And don't need to listen to people that are negative.
Yeah. And be sure to enter the Illustrators of the Future contest.
Every quarter.
There we go. All right. So thank you very much, Echo, for this.
Always.
Yes. And thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We've also been syndicated on the United Public Radio Network, where you can find these podcasts as well. Writers of the Future series can be purchased wherever books are sold in the U.S., Canada, the UK, Australia, and South Africa, and available everywhere via Amazon.com. We are especially appreciative of our sponsor, Carnation, for supporting this podcast. Carnation has been making delicious milk products for over a century and is still going strong. Writers and Illustrators of the Future are contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged. It is free to enter and open to amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy. Again, thank you very much, Echo.
Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer and artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field. If you've been listening to this podcast or are new to it, I thank you very much. I would also appreciate if you took a moment to follow it on whatever platform you use to listen to your podcasts. I also have to let you know that our latest volume of L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future is now available in bookstores throughout the U.S., Canada, the UK, South Africa, and Australia, as well as through all major online retailers. It contains the 12 winning authors and 12 winning illustrators selected by some of your favorite names in science fiction and fantasy. You've heard me talking about it for almost 4 years on this podcast, and so you should know by now what I'm talking about. This week, I'm doing several interviews at the Writers and Illustrators of the Future Volume 39 Workshop Week and Awards event, and I'm very excited to have a very special friend. She's an editor. I was introduced to her via Mike Resnick several years ago. Leslie Robin has been a guest on the show, I guess about 2 years ago. Like I said, she's an editor. She's the editor of Galaxy's Edge magazine and assistant publisher at Arc Manor. She's a published author, Australian author, which you will rapidly find out as soon as she begins speaking. So, welcome back, Leslie.
Hello. Welcome, everyone.
So, we've been on this before, but I guess yours is a great story of how you, you've always had a strong affinity for writing and for reading, but how you actually made it into the science fiction community, and just that journey is, I think, is very, very special. And it's also very special to the person that made that possible, which is ultimately what we try to do with Writers and Illustrators of the Future, as per the original, legacy as created by L. Ron Hubbard. So please enlighten me.
So my career started in an unorthodox way, and a lot of authors will find there's no blueprint to getting their career started. There's no cheat guide. There is examples out there, and there's also lists of, if you do X, Y, Z, you should start your career. But a lot of the major authors that you even know had a very unorthodox start to their career. So I met one of the previous judges on Writers of the Future, Mike Resnick, on eBay. I was buying a book, Anne McCaffrey book. I wanted a signed limited edition book of hers, and he happened to be selling it. Now, of course, if anyone's brought off eBay, you don't know the sellers. They're not under their own name. It's like a little business name. And so I had no idea he was this award-winning author. I just wanted this book. And originally I missed the original, like the ending bid time, and I just missed it by a minute. Like my computer froze, whatever it was, I missed it. I didn't get the book, but no one else did either. So I thought, oh, he probably relist it next week. He never relisted it, and I found out he cycles the books. If they don't sell 1 week, he just waits a few months. So I contacted him directly and said, I would love this book. I see you haven't relisted it. I promise you, if you relist it, I will buy it. I just did the stupid thing and missed the first bid time. And so he said, how about I sell it to you directly then? We can avoid eBay fees. And so I said, that's brilliant. The book arrived, and not only was it like packed beautifully, I found out his wife, Carol, used to do all the packing. But in it, which he didn't quite realize she did, she put flyers in for his like works. So I was like, oh, Mike Resnick. Oh, that's interesting. Like books by Mike Resnick. Okay. And didn't think much of it, but I sent an email to the seller saying, I really appreciate that you were selling a rare book for a really good price. Like it was not expensive at all. So he replied back and he said, I'm an author too, and I don't see my autograph being worth extra. Like I don't see why that should cost people extra. I'm willing to sign books for anyone. And I find it difficult to price books higher with signatures